Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I tell people is, if you really are feeling like, no, there's nothing near me, take a map and make a 50-mile radius around where you live. And then start looking at all the little towns and look them up online. You are going to find unusual. I guarantee it. You're going to find parks that you never knew existed. You're going to find restaurants that you never knew existed. I guarantee it. I have never been anywhere in the United States, and I've spent a lot of time in Canada as well, that's not true. Even in places that are, pretty remote. 50 miles, you're going to find something. And that's, an hour drive, 2-hour drive at the most. It's back roads. And it's funny because I was visiting a friend in Colorado, and I said, let's go up to Cheyenne, which is about a 50-minute drive from where she is. Cheyenne, why would we want to go to Cheyenne? Because I was there once 40 years ago and I want to see what it looks like. So we went up to Cheyenne, and it turns out they have some of the best street art and public art anywhere. I was fabulous. And my friend kept going, oh my God, I had no idea this was here. Then we found a restaurant that was fabulous. Both of us were like, oh my God, this place is great. And everybody around us, we started talking with them. And we ended up having this conversation with like 6 people. And ended up having a fabulous day. And my friend said, I've been living here now for 10 years and I never went up there.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have another great author on the podcast. Excited to have Karen here on the show. On her website, it says travel addict, travel writer, travel photographer, and author of Travel Mania and Wanderlust. Here on the podcast, if you want to go on for a trip, today we're going to go on a trip on the show. And Karen is here. Karen, welcome to Living the Next Chapter.
Hi, good to be here with you.
Exciting to have you here. You're not traveling at the moment. You're here with us, and we're going to travel together around the world. Exciting to have you here.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I just got back, but I was only away for a weekend. So
there you go.
I live in New York, so I went up into the Hudson Valley, which is beautiful.
Nice. So I think we talked earlier when we met. You've been to a lot of countries over the years. What's the grand total to date? How many countries have you been to?
95. and many of them, many, many times.
Wow.
I joke that the last time I went to Australia, notice I said the last time, people said to me, oh, you're going to love it. It's so wonderful. I said, yeah, I kind of know that. This is my 8th trip there. And they went, it's your 8th trip to Australia? Yeah.
Wow. Is that the country you've been to the most?
No.
Okay. What's the country you've been to the most?
Oh, England, for sure.
Okay.
And I lived in England for 3 years. And I go back very frequently because I have a lot of friends there.
Okay. So where did the travel bug bite you? Not on your body, but in time frame. Where did this happen for you to be like, I want to see the world?
When I was a kid,
okay.
I grew up in Manhattan. I'm one of those native New Yorkers. There's not very many of us that still live here. But I grew up in the 50s, and even then, New York was full of different cultures and different communities. And my mother's very into the arts. And so every time a music production came in from overseas, or dance, or theater, I was the one who went with her. My father and brothers had no interest in it, so I was the chosen one and got to see all this stuff. And we went to the museums, and she was very adventurous. And we ate at every conceivable restaurant that we could find that was of a different cuisine. I was probably the only kid at 8 years old in the 50s who loved sushi. I mean, that was not a thing back then.
Mm-hmm.
Still love it, by the way. And so I just, wanted to go see the places where all of these originated. And I really got hooked. And then when I was 17, I left home. And the reason I stress that is I was in New York City, height of the baby boom, and they wanted to get us out through the school system. So I graduated high school at a very young age, went to college for a year and decided I was too young, and I was going to school in New York because I got accepted into other colleges, but they wouldn't let me live in the dorms. I was too young. So, and I decided I needed to get out. So I went to Europe by myself. I saved money for a year, went to Europe, and just fell in love with it because things were really cheap, and I found a job off the books, and I used to go take long weekends all over Europe because I could go get a flight for $20 or $25, maybe.
Yeah.
So I'd go to Paris for the weekend. I'd go to Rome for the weekend. So I was totally bitten by the travel bug.
Wow.
And never turned back. I mean, I've rearranged my life so that I could, in fact, travel.
So, Karen, I probably can't imagine what it's like to not be a traveler now, the way you are now. But seeing the world the way you have, and as often as you have, how does that make you different, do you think, than somebody who never travels, kind of stays within like a certain mile radius of where they grew up and never really sees the world? How has this shaped you?
Well, I think you really get a better understanding of what's going on in the world, including in your home. I mean, you get to understand that there are many right ways of doing things. There's not a way. There's many ways. And there's nothing bad about most of them. There's a few, but the vast majority, people want the same things all over the globe. And you get a true understanding of that. People are very kind. I don't care what population you go into. They want to help you. People want the best for their families. They want a nice place to live, though that we all have different definitions of what that means. They want to have their children do well. It's not very different no matter where you go, and it gives you a real appreciation for a lot of what goes on. Really, it does. And because I've been traveling for so long, one of the things that, and I write about it in my books, is how the world has changed over time. Because when I first started traveling, is nothing like the world now. First of all, there was, forget about phones, being able to, to use a phone anywhere you were. You had to be very resourceful to travel because in most places there was no English spoken, and there was no technology to help you. And people's lifestyles have changed incredibly, mostly because of technology. But I can remember when I was living in Europe in the late 60s, early 70s, I could look at anyone and know what country they were from by looking at their clothes and their shoes.
Wow.
Can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
You absolutely can't do that. And places have changed, some for the better and some absolutely for the worst. And I'm glad that in some places I was there many, many years ago and I have no desire to go back. And I'll give you an example. I've been in Bali 3 times. The first time I went to Bali, it was really unspoiled and beautiful. The second time I went, which I guess was in the early 90s. First time was early 80s, second time was early 90s. And in the early 90s, it was beginning to attract a lot of Australians. Actually, probably it was late 90s. And they were beginning to overrun the place. You could still get to remote areas, but a lot of it had become very hard partying Australians. And I like Australians, but this was not Bali. And the third time I went, I actually went to a different island, but I had to fly in and out of Bali. And I will never go back there again. It's just so overrun. You can't go anywhere on the island and not have it be a tourist destination, as opposed to a place that people live.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what it feels like.
Yeah. Amazing.
And so it's difficult. And it's a beautiful place. But the next island over, Lombok, going east, is absolutely beautiful. People don't go there because it's a Muslim island, and then they're afraid of it, which they shouldn't be, because I would describe it as Muslim light. And people are fabulous, and the place is beautiful. And, it's half the price, if not less than half the price.
Really?
Of Bali. Oh, yeah. And so it's a whole different scene, and it's a 20-minute plane ride or a really horrible ferry ride. I took the ferry over and flew back. I would never take the ferry again, but that's
see,
different story.
So where's a country that totally surprised you, wasn't what you expected when you stepped off the plane, like a total delight for you, that if you were meeting somebody who's like, hey, Karen, I want to go see the world. Where should I start? Go to this place first. Where would you send them?
Well, I wouldn't say start. Start, I would say go somewhere that you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And you speak the language, because it's very difficult if you haven't traveled.
Yeah.
To have to deal with everything you have to deal with traveling and the language. So I'd say go to England. But if you have traveled and you're comfortable with it, I'd say go to South Korea. It blew me away. They are so far ahead of us technologically. I was astounded. And we're talking, I went there 12 years ago. 12 years ago, I changed money at the airport thinking I would need some cash. When I left, I returned with all the cash. No one would take it. I remember going into a coffee shop and offering them to pay them with money. And the barista looked at me like, what? What is this? Why would you want to give me cash? And then I'm watching what other people are doing, and they're using their phones. And this is 12 years ago.
Wow.
And she finally agreed that I could use a credit card. But cash, it literally had no idea what to do with it. They don't use it. And that was 12 years ago.
Wow.
And signs everywhere were in at least 3 languages, so you could navigate really easily. They had an app 12 years ago that I put on my phone, and if I wanted to go somewhere, it would say, okay, walk here, and it would show me. Then it would say, you're waiting for this train, go downstairs, go to this space on the platform, take this train. It'll be there in 3 minutes. Then when you get on the train, okay, get off at this stop. Oh, and by the way, everywhere on their subway is perfect Wi-Fi. Yeah.
And that was 12 years ago.
12 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And the buses were all electric. And most of the cars were hybrids. And with all of this, so it has all of this modern tech and a lot of, modern architecture and all of that, but they also have absolutely beautiful historic places that are gorgeous. And it was so unexpected. I went there for a very particular reason. We haven't talked about this, but my education was in ceramics. I have a bachelor's and a master's of fine arts in ceramics. And so I went there because it's known for having some of the best ceramics on the planet. And they have a fabulous museum outside, maybe an hour outside of Seoul. And they also have like 75 potters who live in this town. So I wanted to go see it. And it was amazing. But the whole country was not what I expected at all. And they have some of the best design. Things are beautiful everywhere you go. And the Koreans, unlike Japanese, are friendly people. I mean, not that the Japanese are not, but they're very reserved.
Yeah.
Not the Koreans, not the South Koreans. They, they speak 2 words of English and you're in a conversation with them.
Yeah. It's amazing.
So,
yeah, I have some friends from there, and my son took Taekwondo, and we learned about the Korean culture through that. And there was so much respect built into the family structure there in South Korea, and so much honor within the family, and
absolutely
respecting your elders. And that was stuff that my son learned through Taekwondo.
Yeah.
With a Korean master in Taekwondo. I just sat there as a parent going, wow, what a difference between Canadian culture where I am and in Korean culture. And I'm like, I love that my son got to experience that, right? That's amazing. So to talk to us about the books first, which one is the first of the 2, Travel Mania or Wanderlust?
Travel Mania was the first book.
Okay.
When did that come out?
Yeah, when did that come out?
That came out in 21.
Okay.
right smack in the middle of the pandemic, at a time when people were desperate, they were sick of being at home, so at least they could read about traveling, even if they couldn't go.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the first book, and it's more of a memoir than the second one is.
Okay.
It's really my story, but told through travel stories. It's kind of like some of the things that we were talking about, how did you start and where did you go first and what were you doing, what got you into this? And then how my life changed. I mean, when I got my master's in ceramics, it was like, what am I going to do with this? I didn't want to teach. And even if I had taught, I would never have had the kind of money that I would have needed to travel the way I travel. And so I found a career, which was as a marketing consultant, first working as a marketing person in corporations and so on, that my clients were paying to send me around the world. That's why I went to Australia so many times, because I was working for a client with a big operation in Australia and wanted me to keep going down there. But, they paid for me to travel. And I always, for most of that time, I had my own business. Starting in 1992, I was on my own. Long before people were solopreneurs, I was a solopreneur. And it was great because I could change my own schedule. Nobody knew what I was doing. And so I would tack on at least a few days, if not a week, if it was somewhere interesting. And I could just say to my other clients, sorry, but, I'm busy.
Yeah.
I'm out of the country. They don't know what I'm doing. And they all knew I did international business. So, that was the assumption. I mean, I had decided I was going to take 8 to 10 weeks vacation a year. And I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
For most of my life. Yeah.
So for the person that picks up Travel Mania for the first time, they're about to open the cover and read page 1, chapter 1. What is your love letter to a reader? What do you want them to know about this book before they start reading?
Well, there's a few things. The first is that you don't have to read in order, because they are independent stories.
Okay.
And I've had people flip through and go, that's somewhere I really want to go. Let's go see what Karen's take is on it. And they'll read about all the places they want to go, or the places they've been, and go, I wonder what her experience, how to compare to mine. Now, this is not a travel guide. It is absolutely not a travel guide. It is travel stories. I, partially because of my career, which was as a marketer and doing marketing research, I got very good at asking people questions. And I can get into a conversation with anyone, anywhere, at any time. And I've learned a lot of tricks to find English speakers when I'm overseas. And I'll give you one of them. Mm-hmm. If I am, and I travel by myself a lot, that's the other thing.
Wow.
If I'm in the middle of nowhere, I'll find a university campus, and they're all over the place. I always bring a book with me that's got a title in very big letters in English, and I'll sit there reading it, and I'll look up occasionally. And on a college campus, there are people who want to learn English. And so they want to come over and have a conversation. I'm clearly an English speaker. And invariably, it gets into long conversations, and I ask people about, where I should go and what I should do from their perspective. And I've gotten invited to dinner more times than I can tell you. Or to lunch, or people have taken me on tours of, where they live, the area, all over the globe. The other thing is, and now it's really easy, because you can go on to Yelp or wherever else and find restaurants that have a communal table. And so if you sit down at a communal table at a restaurant, start a conversation with someone. And the reality is, if they didn't want to talk, they wouldn't be at that table.
Smart.
Yeah. And again, invariably, in Europe, everybody speaks English, pretty much. When you get to other places, not so much. But even still, people will try because they really want to have a conversation. I mean, English has become the second world language. No question about it.
Yeah.
And, so no matter what your first language is, you are studying English.
Yeah, it's kind of like a bridge language, right? I know, like in
Yeah,
India, for example, I have people that I know in India. There's so many different dialects and different everything from around India that English just kind of seems to be a bridge between everything. So,
absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the book. That's a great idea, Karen. I love that.
Oh, yeah. And it works like a charm. It really does. Anyway, so that's the first book.
Yeah.
And it goes pretty much from when I was a kid. And then all the way through, I came back from Europe on March 15th, 16th, whatever it was, 2020, which was the last day that flights came into New York.
Wow.
Then you didn't have to make special arrangements. And so I was, literally, I came back from that right into COVID, went into isolation for a couple of weeks because I had been on a plane with all these people,
right.
A bunch of them coughing. But it goes through that. The Wanderlust came about because I had a lot of people very, very interested in what I was writing, and I do a lot of social media, and people were saying, you have to have more stories. I mean, you write these stories, on social media, you got to write another book. And, okay, what do you want me to write the book about? And it came about that what they wanted was unusual people that I met. For whatever reason, I thought they were unusual. Places that they would never go, but that I considered really interesting. And I have several of those. And food. People love food stories. What's the best food, most unusual food, the absolute worst meal you ever had, that kind of thing. And I made a list of all the stories I could write and realized I have enough for another 3 or 4 books. In fact, I'm writing another book, but it's a little different than the first 2. So, because I'm interviewing people for it, because I'm going to tell some other people's stories in addition to my own. But, but these 2 books, the first one I had been writing forever, basically, just because I was writing travel stories, and I took classes and workshops and have been in a writing group for many, many years. And my writing group said to me, you really have a book here. You've got to get this thing published. And I had tried about 20 years before and had gotten an agent at a very, very reputable literary agency. And shortly after we signed the contract, she left. And a literary agency assigned an agent to me who didn't like travel books.
Oh.
A terrible match. It was just an awful match. And I just gave it up. And then I was working and traveling, and I was still writing, but I just didn't want to go through the hassle of all of that again. And then once I was nearing retirement age, I really cut back what I was doing. And so this is my 3rd career. I was a ceramicist first, I was a marketing person second, and now I'm a writer. And as a result of the 2 books, I've been approached by several organizations to write them for pay, I might add.
Nice.
Who want me to write for them quite regularly. A couple of others who accept my articles pretty much. I've had a couple of them rejected, but not very many. And so I've got a real pipeline of places to send things. So I'm getting published constantly. Wow. And I'm working on the 3rd book. Yeah.
Wow. So talk a little bit about being grounded through all the pandemic and everything and not being able to travel. What did that feel like for you, someone who loves to experience the world, to not be able to do that? And what are you seeing today, like March 2024? How are things improving? Are we going to get back to the way it was before? What are your thoughts?
Well, when we were smack in the middle of COVID, for the first 6 months, I didn't go anywhere. I just didn't. Nobody did. It was a horrible time, particularly in New York, because we were kind of the epicenter.
Yeah.
And where I live, I'm right near a hospital and on the path to 2 other hospitals. And I was hearing ambulance sirens 3 or 4 times an hour, 24/7. So I was not doing anything too adventurous. And then I got to the point where I was going crazy.
Yeah.
And I decided that what I would do, and I might add, I have a car. I was going to be a tourist in New York City and discover things in New York that I had heard about but didn't really spend time doing, and really see the city through the eyes of someone who isn't a lifelong New Yorker.
Mm.
And I'll give you a couple of examples. I had read about an area in Brooklyn called Bushwick,
Yes.
which is home to outsider art. Not outsider art, to street art.
Yeah.
And it is incredible what they have there. And so I went to Bushwick to go see it, and I got hooked. And I started doing web searches and found at least 20 other places in and around New York that have unbelievable street art. Then I started looking at parks. New York has got a plethora of parks in and around it, most of which I'd never been to. And I started going to the ones that were around the perimeter of Manhattan, so ones that were in Brooklyn and Queens and New Jersey, and looking back at Manhattan from the vantage point of all of these different places and photographing. And then I was going a little bit further afield and taking a road trip for a week down to a friend owned a bed and breakfast in Flemington, New Jersey. So I went down there and spent a week down there because I knew it was going to be safe and I was the only one there and I had a friend there. And then I started going further afield where I didn't want to get on an airplane, but I was driving. I went up to the Finger Lakes, and then I went along the coast going north, and then I went along the coast going south. And then I guess about in 23, maybe the end of 22, I started traveling again, flying and going places. And my travel schedule, I have 10 trips scheduled between now and the end of the year, and I think there's probably a couple more to come.
Wow.
So I'm back to where I was.
Good.
But a lot of people are not. And one of the things, and I'm really an advocate for getting people to go see the world. I mean, that was kind of the intent of the books, and it certainly is with the articles. In fact, I just wrote one called How to Get Over Your Fear of Traveling or something to that effect. That was published, and it was the first article I've had that's gotten a slew of people responding saying, thank you. These are great tips, and you've given me the push to go out and travel.
Yeah.
And so I felt really good about that because as I said, I think it does help to make the world a better place, and it's fun. It's really fun. And I teach some classes about travel. I'm doing one this spring called America's Quirky Places. And I'm kind of taking a tour of lots and lots of small towns that are really not big tourist destinations, but that are great fun.
Hmm.
So, I've always got a different angle on, okay, so, how are we going to spin it this time and get people interested?
I love it.
And I wrote an article that was really fun. I was down in New Orleans and actually on a press trip. They were paying for it, but I was taking a lot of Ubers. And I started talking with all the Uber drivers, and I learned more about the city from the Uber drivers than I did from anyone else. And so I wrote an article called Seeing New Orleans Through the Eyes of Uber Drivers. And literally that's what it is, all of these stories that the Uber drivers were telling me. As I said, I can get anybody.
I like it.
I have some great stories. Yeah.
So Karen, where do we find all the links for articles and stuff? How do we follow that part of your journey as well?
Well, if you want to know where I'm going at any given time, I am on both Facebook and LinkedIn very, very regularly.
Okay.
And it's my name. So just look up Karen Gershowitz and you will find me.
Okay.
And I have a website that's also my name. I've kept it all very simple.
Well done.
KarenGershowitz.com.
Nice.
And you can read about me and see where I've been and get a lot of the press links and see a lot of photographs.
Okay.
Because I'm a good photographer. Again, my background was in art, so that helps.
Yeah.
So I have a good eye. And by all means, the books you can get anywhere. Wanderlust came out in October of 2023, and Travel Mania, as I said, came out in 21. And both of them you can get them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or a local bookstore can order it if they don't already have it. It's accessible almost anywhere.
So, Karen, what is something that we can do as a traveler to be a better traveler, a better guest in someone else's world? How can we show up and show kindness, be gracious? What are people looking for from a guest in their world? How can we be better? How can we be a better tourist? What can we do?
Well, I'm going to call it traveler as opposed to tourist.
Good. Okay, good.
But that's for starters. Tourist means you're going to see the sights.
Good.
Traveler means you're going to experience the country.
I love it.
And the culture. And as a traveler, you want to try the local foods. You're not going into McDonald's or wherever else. You're going to eat what the locals eat. You're going to try and engage people in conversation. If you really want to know a country, and mind you, if I'm going to a country for the first time, I do go to the tourist sites. I'm curious. I want to see them. And then I go off the beaten path. And one of the ways to do that is if you go into a city, there is going to be public transportation. Take the public transportation and take it to somewhere that you don't know where you're going. Just hop on a subway or a bus. Bus is better because you can see. And take a bus out to a neighborhood. And if you see something interesting, a nice looking park or cafes or whatever, get off, walk around, sit down with your book, have a cup of coffee, people watch, and try and get into a conversation with someone. And ask them questions. Be curious. I think curiosity is the thing that really drives understanding a culture more than anything else. And if you're driving, take a back road. Follow, and if you see an interesting sign, follow it. I was up in Canada last spring. Yeah. And I was on Vancouver Island. Mm-hmm. And I had gone fairly far north, and on my way back, I had plenty of time, so I just took all back roads. And I saw a sign that said woodworking. Okay, I'll go see. And then I see another sign that says weaver, and another sign that says potter. And it turned out that it was a whole mountain, literally, with dirt roads, but it was all these craftspeople. And they had little galleries in their homes. And each one I got into a conversation with, and they would send me to the next person and say, Julie sent you. Tell them that Julie sent you. I had the best afternoon. And it was because I would never have known about this place. Yeah. Certainly it was not in any guidebook and not even on a website. But I just stumbled onto it. And you have to be willing to, go out of your comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah.
You're never going to get lost forever.
No.
It's hard to do that. And sometimes people will say, yeah, but, I might go into a really terrible neighborhood. You might. That's happened. I've done that. I'm sitting on a bus. I'm not going to get off if it looks like a neighborhood that's sketchy.
Yeah.
And I'll just take the same bus when it turns around and goes back. But at least I will have seen it.
Yeah.
And most times that's not the case. Most times, I'm going into a perfectly fine neighborhood. And you really get to see how people live. And it's a whole different way of experiencing the place. So that's a, be curious and get out of your comfort zone.
I remember doing a trip for work, and I went to Nova Scotia, and I'm in Ontario. Went out to Nova Scotia, first time ever seeing the east coast of Canada. And I worked there for a week in an office, and then I had a rental car by myself. I could go back to the hotel at 5 o'clock and just sit there and watch television, or I could go to the ocean. And I remember telling people in the office, what are you doing tonight, Dave, after work? I'm like, well, I'm going to go to the ocean. They're like, why? Because I live in Ontario and I don't have an ocean that's like right there. So I took my rental car and I could drive as much as I want. And I just drove around,
Oh,
and
yeah.
went and just to see things, stick my foot in the water. Like, this is great. Like, go around and just do that. And the same thing you said, just follow the signs. I didn't
Yep.
know where I was going. I kind of knew I had to go that kind of one direction to get back to my hotel, but just drive and stop. Something catches your eye. Like, what's this? What's this plaque? What's this thing? What's this
Right.
memorial? Go take a look and just learn. And I found that
Yeah.
was the coolest thing for me, is I felt like I was not just seeing the sights that people would see on the brochure that would be in front of you to go see this thing, but what's that? And be curious. I love that.
Exactly. And that's, that is the best possible way to travel and to be a traveler.
Yeah.
And the other thing is don't try and go to 6 countries in 2 weeks. Because you won't even remember what you see.
Right.
Far better to go to one place
Yeah.
and just park yourself and spend time absorbing what's there. Then you're not worrying about, oh God, I got to pack and move again and do this. Yeah.
So of your next list of places you're going, are any of those new locations for you, or are they all return trips?
Interestingly enough, they are all return trips.
Okay.
For various reasons. But yeah, they are all, can't think of a single place I'm going that's brand new to me.
Is there any place on your list of new places to go you haven't been to yet that is really top of mind for you that you want to get to right away? Where is it?
Yeah. Ghana.
Oh.
Ghana is very, very high on my list for lots of reasons, but I really want to go to Ghana. And I really want to go to some of the South Pacific islands, not Tahiti particularly, but some of the smaller, more remote islands, which still have fascinating cultures, and I'm a fear they will not be there much longer, given climate change. So that Malta, people have said is beautiful. I've never been to Malta. Zambia, is it? Why am I not saying it right? Zambia, which again, people have said is spectacularly beautiful. So that's high on my list. Yeah, so the list never gets shorter. And in some of them, I'm going back to Norway. I've been in Norway before, but I'm going back to Norway because I'm going there during the time when there should be really good northern lights. I have tried 3 times and managed to never see the northern lights.
Oh, wow.
Including in Iceland, including in northern Minnesota, and including in Canada on the Georgian Bay. Never saw them. And so I am determined. And this time, I'm going to be on a cruise the entire time.
Oh.
And what they've said is you go to sleep, somebody is always out there and up, and if the lights appear, they come waking everybody.
I've seen them twice living here, and they are spectacular. Like the whole sky is dancing. It is the most amazing thing. Forget fireworks, forget all that. That's boring compared to that. It is the most amazing, shimmering, glowing spectacle that you'll ever experience.
That's what everybody says. And I've seen photographs and I've seen videos. I want to see it in person.
You are due. You are due.
Yeah, that's what I figure. It's like it's time. It is my time to see it. So that's why I'm going back. And I'm going back shortly before that, actually, to the Balloon Festival in Albuquerque, which I was at many years ago. It is one of the most spectacular sites on the planet. And a friend of mine just moved there and said, come, I'll arrange for everything and you can stay with me.
Nice.
How could I refuse this?
Come on.
Yeah, exactly. So, so there are reasons to go back to places.
What can we do as we travel the world to make the place a better place when we leave? I want to have a very small imprint on the world. What can we do to make it better as we travel?
It is difficult, unfortunately, if you're flying somewhere to not have a carbon footprint.
Right.
On the other hand, when you get somewhere, part of it is to live the way the culture lives.
Good.
And I do not stay in 5-star hotels ever. I'm not interested in that. I tend to stay in smaller places. I sometimes rent cars because you have to. on Vancouver Island, you don't have much of a choice, for example. But if I don't need a car, I don't get one. Don't need to do that. But I think the most important thing is to engage with the people who are there. I really think that's the key to it, because I think the more understanding there is, I think one of the things that happens is I'm learning about their culture. They're also learning about my culture. And for me, it's very easy to start a conversation when people ask me where I'm from and I say New York City. Everybody has heard of New York City. I don't think there's, anyone, there may be a few isolated people on the planet, but not very many. And then when they hear that I'm a native New Yorker, people always have questions for me.
Yeah.
And so I will answer any question they have. And, and then I express my own interest in their culture. And I think that goes a long way, showing an appreciation for the way they do things, as opposed to assuming that the way that we do things, and Canadians and Americans do things differently, that's the right way.
Yeah.
It is a way. And as I said at the beginning, the more you travel and the more you experience the world, the more you understand that there are a multitude of ways of doing things, and they're just different. There's no value judgment on better work.
You mentioned Bushwick. I have a friend that lived there for many, many years, and I went there often to see him. And as a Canadian, walking the streets of Bushwick and meeting the great people there, it just changed my world. And then they take me to different sections of New York, and you have the entire world within New York and Manhattan.
Absolutely.
Right? And you can step from one street to the next and be in a totally different world.
Absolutely.
Being that you've been to 95 countries and counting, how do you see New York differently now that you've seen the world? Is New York a different place for you now that you travel?
Not really.
Okay.
I always thought of it as being a multicultural setting. And it has been from the time I was a child. That's not different. What is maybe different is that some of the populations have gotten much larger and taken over new areas. My parents, when I was 10, bought a home in Queens. And at the time, it was, a normal, not a suburb because it's part of the city, but it was, a mix of people. Now, almost the entire area is Korean. I mean, almost every home is owned by a Korean family. And in the next town over, you'll find a whole town that's nothing but people from, actually, there's a big Venezuelan community. Queens, I think, is the most diverse part of New York City. And New York City is, if not the most diverse city in the globe, it's pretty close. I don't think there's a country that you couldn't find a cluster of people from.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, where my father worked, it was all Polish. I mean, it was an entire Polish community. And right next door was an entire Scandinavian community.
Yeah.
Literally, you walk down 2 blocks and it was Scandinavian. If you walk 2 blocks the other direction, it was, Latin America.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that in all of these places, there are restaurants catering to the local population. So if you want an authentic Korean meal, or if you want an authentic Greek meal, or you want authentic whatever, you can find it easily.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the takeaway, Karen, as we talk, is even if you can't travel the world right now, travel your community, get to know your community. For you have so many population groups represented in New York that you can travel the world without leaving the city.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. But for anyone else that's listening, how in touch are you with your community? How in touch are you with the things that are on that off road that you wouldn't normally go down? Finding and chasing your curiosity as a traveler, or even in your own space. I think you're going to expand your world and experience new things. So be curious, I think, is the big thing I'm taking away from your books and from talking to you.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I tell people is, if you really are feeling like, no, there's nothing near me, take a map and make a 50-mile radius around where you live and then start looking at all the little towns and look them up online, you are going to find unusual. I guarantee it. You're going to find parks that you never knew existed. You're going to find restaurants that you never knew existed. I guarantee it. I have never been anywhere in the United States, and I've spent a lot of time in Canada as well, that's not true.
Right.
Even in places that are, pretty remote. 50 miles, you're going to find something. And that's, an hour drive, 2-hour drive at the most.
Yeah.
It's back roads. And it's funny because I was visiting a friend in Colorado, and I said, let's go up to Cheyenne, which is about a 50-minute drive from where she is. Cheyenne, why would we want to go to Cheyenne? Because I was there once 40 years ago and I want to see what it looks like. So we went up to Cheyenne, and it turns out they have some of the best street art and public art anywhere. It was fabulous. And my friend kept going, oh my God, I had no idea this was here. Then we found a restaurant that was fabulous. Both of us were like, oh my God, this place is great. And everybody around us, we started talking with them. And we ended up having this conversation with like 6 people. And ended up having a fabulous day. And my friend said, I've been living here now for 10 years and I never went up there.
Right. Yeah. I live right near Niagara Falls, and it's like, you kind of take these things for granted after a while. You're like, yeah, it's just a big hill with water. No, it's amazing. You need to go and live it through the eyes of someone who travels, and don't just live it from a local perspective even. Go and experience your neighborhood and all the great things around you. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Karen, again, the website, the books, where do we find them? We want to find your articles again and follow your journey as you write and get updates from you as you travel the world with all the great places coming up. Again, take us to the website and the books again.
Okay. The website is KarenGershowitz.com. And if you want to follow me just to see what I'm doing ongoing, I write every single day. Go on to Facebook. It's my name. You can't miss it. Or it's Karen Gershowitz, author. And I'm also on Instagram, and I'm on LinkedIn, although I post there less frequently. And the 2 books, the first one is Travel Mania, Stories of Wanderlust. And the second one is Wanderlust, Extraordinary People, Quirky Places, and Curious Cuisine. And they are both available wherever you buy books, pretty much. Amazing.
It's good. Karen, thank you for taking us on a journey as we travel.
My pleasure.
It's great to hear your stories, and it's exciting for me because I have listeners in the countries we've been talking about. So they're hearing you talk about how much you love their country, and they're listening to the show, which is like a full circle moment. So thank you so much for sharing your journeys with us. And as the new books come out in the future, come back. Give us an update on your travels and all the great things you're up to.
Do that.
I love it.
Yeah, well, it's the third one is in the works. It is in the works. So this one's going to be, the last one only took 2 years, but that was in the middle of the pandemic. So this one's going to take longer.
There you go. We'll come back when we want to have you back. It'd be great.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Great talking with you.
Everyone, all the information, as always, is in the show notes to reach out to Karen. And again, follow the articles too, and follow the book, follow the journey. Go grab a copy. You know someone who loves to travel. They need these books. So make sure you share this episode with them as well. Karen, thank you so much for doing this.
A pleasure.
Hey, well, thank you for listening. It's a new year, and we're excited to be releasing even more great episodes of Living the Next Chapter. And we want you to come along for the journey. Thank you for being here. If you know of an author that you would love to have featured on the podcast, an author that you enjoy, an author that brings you that excitement, that you would just love to hear them interviewed on this podcast, I would love to hear your suggestion for a future guest. And what would be a question or two that you would want us to ask them on your behalf? Go to livinginthenextchapter.com. There's a little speak pipe icon there. You can leave me a voice message. tell me who should be on the show and give me some question ideas. And I'll use your request and reach out to that author and invite them on and give you full credit for the idea. livingthenextchapter.com. Would love to hear your suggestion, and thank you for listening. Catch you on the next episode.